Welcome. We get together again to hear some writers read. And today we have Bob Corwin and Lou Templeton. And we're so looking forward to hearing them read. And of course we have to start the right way. We don't dare not start the right way with Paul Liebank's poem. I say a word and you'll say a word. Right, right, right.
Right, right, right.
Until you get it right.
Until you get it right.
Then read aloud.
Then read aloud.
You'll draw a crowd.
You'll draw a crowd.
And bring us great delight.
And bring us great delight.
Oh, welcome Bob Corwin. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And I'm so looking forward to hearing more of your good
Well, I am
family
too.
story.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. That's a good motto for this show. But I wrote you an email earlier about an early reading memory that you might have of somebody reading to you or you reading to yourself for the first time early. Did you come up with some memory?
Yes, I remember. It's strange what comes back when you look back far enough. But yeah, when I was little, we were living in the Northeast. Had a rich great uncle, and occasionally go to his house for adult parties, and I'd be along, and it wasn't too wonderful. It was pretty stuffy, actually. Everybody in their three-piece suits and trying to impress. Anyway, then what to do? And I was the only kid at those occasions. What to do? So, but if I could bring on an attack of asthma, my grandmother, my father's mother, would come and rescue me, and we'd go up to the library. The house had a library, just like this, and curl up in a nice soft chair, and she would read to me. Whatever happened to me, I forget exactly. It was probably Winnie the Pooh, but it could have been grown-up things. And she was quite a gal. I mean, she was very bright and wrote books and things, but anyway, very warm. And so
That's an early memory, isn't it? And Bob, I do have to ask you, were you ever called Bobby instead of Bob?
No, it was almost worse. I was called Robin.
Robin?
Yes. I mean, it gets sickening as you go on, but I was born on March 21st, the first day of spring.
Oh,
so there you go.
Oh, good.
And in my teen years, when your identity is always at a loss, I signed my papers in English, R. Corwin, because Anyway, thank you for asking.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing you read today.
Very
and
good.
This wonderful, rich family story.
This is about some girls that came from Japan and stayed with my family in Connecticut 150 years ago. So, and the chapter is called Sister. Mori did not know what to do with the girls from Japan. 3 girls had arrived who had spent 10 years in America. They were aged 7, 11, and 12. They were the daughters of samurai families defeated in the recent war which brought the Meiji regime into power. Empress Haruko had endorsed the mission of these girls sent by her government to America to learn about the West and return to help the women of Japan modernize the country. Mori was the chargé d'affaires at Japan's mission to the United States and was a brilliant ambassador. But when the girls arrived at the Washington train station in blinding snow, January 1873, he was at a loss. He had no guidance other than to find them homes and education in America. 10 years. After temporary lodging, 7-year-old Ume Tsuda was accepted into a comfortable Georgetown home by Adeline and Charles Landman, who was Mori's right-hand man at the Japanese mission. For the other two girls, Shiga Nagai, 11, and Tsudamatsu Yamakawa, 12, Maury's connections found a family in New Haven, the home of Leonard Bacon, a congregational minister. His family was known and educated, would be open to hosting guests from Asia, and their frugal minister's budget would welcome a stipend from the Japanese government. Maury brought the two girls north on the night train to New Haven, and they arrived at the city's Union Station on October 31st, 1872. They were taken by carriage to the white clapboard house of Leonard and Catherine Bacon on Church Street. Leonard and Maury discussed and agreed on terms for the lodging and education of the girls. After dinner, Leonard and Maury talked into the evening about the dynamic rise of Japan, its rapid ascent from the medieval Tokugawa shogunate to the centralized Meiji government in Tokyo. A constitution was forthcoming, and Leonard was ready with recommendations for freedom of worship. In 1872, most of Leonard Bacon's 11 surviving children were grown and out of the house. 3 sons were veterans of the Union Army and had returned to civilian life as a teaching surgeon, a New London preacher, and a lawyer in Rochester, New York. 3 other sons were ministers. One was a rancher in Colorado, and a daughter, Catherine, was married. Patriarch Leonard's New Haven home was a household of women. Nellie was 15, and Alice, who will be a central character, was 14. Catherine, his second wife, was often confined to bed with arthritis, and Leonard's firstborn, Rebecca, was Catherine's right hand and manager of the household. Rebecca, 46, was a generation older than the girls, and as housekeeper kept her distance. She was well past the age of sitting on anyone's lap, but we should not begrudge her some envy or resentment when she saw the girls from Japan indulged in their easy lives. They joined games and skating parties. The girls planned excursions without asking permission of their hosts. Shiga tagged along on a trip to Bowdoin, Maine, with Reverend Abbott, where she was living now, where he gave the commencement address, and she got Longfellow's autograph. Ume Tsuda, living in Georgetown, Maryland, age 7, was adored by her teachers and doting foster parents, quote, who traveled with her through New England in the summers. She shook Senator Charles Sumner's hand and sat on Longfellow's lap. Quote, a kiss to your little Japanese ward, unquote. Longfellow closed one letter to Landman, Ume's host. Rebecca wondered how Hannah was doing with the laundry. Were the potatoes peeled for dinner? Rebecca had returned from Hampton Agricultural and Industrial School in Virginia in 1871 to care for her invalid foster mother, Catherine, in New Haven. But death wrong-footed her, and Rebecca died in 1878, 4 years before Catherine. Leonard warned his first child, quote, few lives are so full of self-sacrifice and self-forgetfulness as hers has been. He wrote his son Edward, so full of love and care for work for others. Thank God for her life. And she kind of kept the whole ship going. Tsudamatsu and Shiga were warmly accepted into the Bacon household, though within a few days it was clear that they would progress much faster with their English if they were separated. So Shiga was placed in the home of John Stevens Cabot Abbott. This is the headquarters for the WASP. Another minister in Fairhaven, a mile away. Tsutomatsu was adopted as youngest sister at the Bacons. She was Alice's student-in-waiting, Nellie's piano protege, and Catherine, the bedridden mother, reading companion. At 12, she was tall, eyes on a level with Alice, who was 14. Then a quote, Alice Mabel Bacon was a serious-minded soul with a sharp wit, a passion for books, and an unusually open mind. Like Tsutomatsu, she possessed a self-reliance that belied her years. Similar both in age and scholarly intensity, the two girls soon became inseparable.
Oh my.
Chattering away to Alice instead of to Shiga and Ume, she improved her English by the day. At age 12, in 1870, Alice had gone south to spend a year with older sister Rebecca at the Hampton Agricultural and Industrial School, later Hampton Institute in Virginia. Hampton was established to teach free black children and young people literacy and vocational skills. Rebecca taught and was vice principal in 1869 to 71. Alice, who had joined her for a year, was comfortable with people unlike herself. She attended classes and even taught a bit. Other teachers called her the little professor. Now, in New Haven, Tsutomatsu was soon ready to join Alice on her daily walk to the local school, Miss Montfort's Grove Hall Seminary, a block away. A cupulate building set back from the herringbone brick sidewalk. Autograph books were popular. In one student's elegant collection, Tsutomatsu signed vertically in Japanese. Alice wrote, "Cease your chatter and follow me," in Greek. In 1876, 3 years after they had arrived in New Haven, Tsutomatsu and Shiga went to Philadelphia to join Ume, the Charles Landmans, Ume's foster parents, and other Japanese for the Centennial Exposition. A studio photo of the three shows Tsutomatsu as the tall center of the triangle, her protective arm around Ume, who holds a reassuring hand, with Shiga on her right. And they're all in Western Victorian dress.
Oh, yes.
In Alice's company, Tsutomatsu soon caught up with her American peers at Miss Montfort's seminary, and within 3 years she was ready to take the exams for Hill House High School. She passed them easily and enrolled at this leader in New Haven's emerging public school system. The first issue of their school's Hill House Gleaner newspaper featured Tsutomatsu's article in which she wrote that young Japanese are radical, don't want to live on in the Middle Ages. Yet with a tug of tradition, said it was not appropriate to expect women to ascend to leadership in politics, the judge's bench, or church. This was a while ago. Well, we're still working on it.
We're still working.
Alice and Tsutomatsu found aversion from their scholarly intensity with a larger family. They joined Leonard's family when they fled the pestilential New Haven heat in summer and were boarding guests at the Colebrook farm of Catherine Bacon's cousins in northwest Connecticut. Over an hour by train, plus a long, dusty cart ride, brought them to the hamlet of Colebrook, high in the Litchfield Hills, where lakes, streams, and pools gave them a chance for swimming and fishing by day, while the evenings at the lodge were filled with poetry and charades.
Oh, yeah.
New Haveners claimed that Charles Dickens wrote that Hill House Avenue in New Haven, with its mansions and hallowed elms, was the most beautiful street in America. There was a Hill House Society, which included many wealthy residents. Leonard Bacon was not wealthy, but was a member by stature. Wives formed their own group for charity. Private philanthropy unknown to her in Japan, Tsudamatsu attended with Alice, sewing clothes for needy black families and refugees from the Franco-Prussian War. Tsudamatsu graduated from New Haven's Hill House High School in April '77. While most of the boys, it was co-ed, while most of the boys prepared for exams to enter college, she was the only girl to go on to college that year, and the first girl from Japan to go to college. The U.S. had by now a handful of chartered colleges for women. Vassar had enrolled students for over a decade at the time that both Tsudamatsu and Shiga were admitted, beginning their first year in September of 1878. Shiga enrolled for their certificate in music, Tsudamatsu for the 4-year baccalaureate. They were the first non-white students at the institution. Alice Bacon was eligible for college. In 1874, Harvard began exams for women to qualify for its annex program, which became Radcliffe College 20 years later. Alice took the exams in 1881 and tested well, receiving certification in 3 subjects. Her success qualified her to study with Harvard professors at the Society for the Collegiate Education of Women in Cambridge, but her family could not afford college for Alice, and the household needed her at home. Only Alice and Nellie remained with Leonard and Catherine. Her mother, Catherine, was failing and needed 24-hour care. Soon enough, her parents would be gone. Alice would need to look ahead toward how she would settle household affairs, along with planning a vocation. She would need to continue her studies independently. In the summer of 1875, the Pittman family of New Haven saw a chance to have their own student from Japan and invited Sotokichi Orihu to stay with them. They grew fond of him during his stay while he prepared to enter the Naval Academy, and he returned later for visits to New Haven on vacation from Annapolis. Mrs. Pittman thought he would make a good match for Shiga Nagai, who lived across the street with their friends, the Abbotts. After Shiga had enrolled at Vassar, Sotokichi Orihu traveled to Poughkeepsie, where Vassar is, with other cadets, providing dance partners for Vassar vets. In June of 1881, this is a quote, Ume traveled to Poughkeepsie for commencement. The 10 years granted the girls by the Japanese government were drawing to a close, and though Tsudamatsu and Ume had successfully petitioned for 1-year extensions to complete their degrees, for Shiga, 3 years of college was enough. She had earned a certificate in music from Vassar, and Sotokichi Orihu was graduating from the Naval Academy in Annapolis and returning to Japan. Commencement was followed with a musical soiree, where Shiga and other music school graduates were featured performers. Tsudamatsu had been elected class president for her 2nd year at Vassar and was marshal for Founders Day. Ume, feeling quite grown up, quote, assumed the role of hostess at the festivities, finding seats for Shiga's guests, including Orihu. Shiga collected her certificate in music and headed back to Japan. Leonard Bacon had had a worsening heart condition, and Jesus' birth was darkened by Leonard's death at age 79 on Christmas Eve, 1881. Their loss now capsized the season's holidays, including for Tsudamatsu, who had returned to New Haven over vacation to be with her foster family. Sorrow continued as Catherine was unable to attend the graduation of her foster daughter at Vassar in June 1882. Catherine died a few months after Leonard and was buried next to her husband in New Haven's Grove Street Cemetery. Tsutomatsu had now lost her foster parents. She wrote to Alice from Poughkeepsie with condolence, but consoled herself with imagining that she and Alice might begin a new life together in Japan. If Alice's family would only agree, could she join Tsutomatsu in Tokyo next spring? Quote, she and Alice could keep house together, chaperoned by Tsutomatsu's mother in Tokyo and hosting whatever Bacon relatives or Vassar alumni happened by. Alice would teach English and Tsutomatsu physiology and gymnastics. Quote, you see, we would live in American style if you like, while we can have Japanese things for my mother, or we could live half and half. Tsutomatsu imagined, quote, when the summer vacations come, we might go north and visit the home of my childhood and further up to Hokkaido and see the Ainus, since you are so much interested in ethnology. June 1882. Tsutomatsu attained top honors and was elegant in white silk for her graduation photograph. She was the first woman from Japan to graduate from college. At 22, she was the age of Empress Haruko, who had endorsed their mission to America at the Girls' Palace audience 10 years before. Full of hope, Tsutomatsu returned to New Haven after graduation, but by the end of summer 1882, their lives divided. After the death of Alice's parents, money remained tight. She would have to pack up, move out, and rent the house for income needed by remaining family. Umetsuda had flourished in the Landman's house in Georgetown, and now in spring 1882 graduated with honors from Washington's Archer Institute. Shiga had returned to Japan and wrote to Tsutomatsu. Shiga was encouraged as she headed toward married life with Sotokichi Orihu, who was destined for a prestigious career. A small group boarded a train in New York in October 1882 for a westward farewell journey. Alice and the Landmans joined Ume and Tsutomatsu, two daughters of Japan, just completing over half their lives with American families. The Landmans parted from the girls in Chicago. Alice stayed on the train with Tsutomatsu and Ume until Cheyenne, a last look at antelope herds and prairie dog towns. Adeline Landman would remain a mother by letter to Ume, who confronted her mother country as an educated, confident American girl, having left Japan at age 6, now returning at 17. Ume had written her last letter in Japanese to her mother 10 years before from Georgetown. She had come to excel in English and would have to relearn Japanese once she returned home, bearing an American accent through her life. When they had left Japan 10 years earlier, Tsutomatsu had been twice Ume's age, with a longer memory of growing up in Japan, including the traumas of the Boshin War and its aftermath of defeat and separation from her family. Of the two, she felt more keenly her identity caught between two countries. Now, though she was older, cosmopolitan, after 10 years in America, she faced her rapidly changing, conflicted mother country. At college, she had written for the Vassar magazine Miscellany how Japan was leaving the Middle Ages and entering the modern world. And she wrote, with telegraphs and railroads, banks and universities, and a government rapidly transforming itself into a limited monarchy, unquote, Japan's surge toward parity with the West was felt in social and political discord. The ambitious goals of national modernization was challenged. Some still clung to ancient traditions, questioning the wholesale copying of the West.
Oh, Bob,
That's
thank
terrific.
you so much. Bob, are you the first person to actually write this story down?
No, I mean, this part, particularly this chapter, much of it is based on a book written by Janice Nomura,
Okay.
who went to Yale, married American Japanese, and then did research there when she found the letters from my family. And anyway, she wrote a book called Daughters of the Samurai, beautifully written. And so this is very dependent on, and in fact, the whole reason that this part is, Bev and I had gone to Saturday University at the Asian Art Museum, years past.
Yeah.
Walked up from our house. And on wonderful occasions, every Saturday morning they would have speakers from around, usually Asia. And Elliott Bay Books had a display out in front of books related to the morning's topic, and usually interesting covers. And there was one with these 3 Japanese girls in Victorian dress from that photo at the Philadelphia exhibit. And something clicked, because I remember conversations about.
Oh, Bob.
Anyway, so, that really helps.
Oh, this has been such a gift to all of us.
Thank you.
I have a question. Have you ever been able to trace that family to today? Those 3 girls?
No, let's see, I traced them basically through that same book. Oh, the one that stuck with us, they interwove.
Yeah.
But Ume Tsuda was the only one that didn't marry when she returned to Japan. Had an American accent. And she wanted to teach English and bring her Japanese girls and women along. And so the power structure was still male. Anyway, long story, but she was the one that actually was the leader in establishing, there is now in Tokyo, you can go and visit it, there's a Tsuda college for, is it all women? Anyways, it's a university now. It's like 2,000 or 3,000 people, but it's Tsuda College after Ume, who was the youngest one on this trip. And anyway, and I've had family members that have traveled through there, in all the years since, and they visit there. And there were, Ume died back in the 20s, but then there were other connections through other. Thank you for asking. That's a rambling answer. But
It's just fascinating.
But the imprint is there, and then there were, because Alice went back, eventually went to Japan to help teach, and made other friends, and adopted a Japanese girl and brought her back. And those connections sort of kept going, like my aunt went and stayed with it. Anyway, yeah.
Well, thank you, Bob. Wonderful,
Thank you.
wonderful. Welcome again, Lou. I'm so looking forward to this story. But I want you to share with us an early memory of reading with somebody, or you reading to yourself, perhaps.
Well, I first became aware of books when I was still just really small, because we had encyclopedias.
Oh, yes.
So I used to pull them off and look at the pictures and all. And then the next thing, my mother was a teacher, but she had, she wasn't teaching when she had 6 kids, so, I was the middle child. But she loved books, and she always gave books for Christmas presents.
Awesome.
And, so I grew up
that
with
was
books.
your connection with books, with Mom.
With my
Mommy.
mother.
Yes,
With my mother.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for coming today. I'm so looking forward to this story, Lou.
Well, it's a little bit different. But anyway, the title is Family Matters. Texas is a big state. Sarah drove over 4 hours from Fort Worth to pick up her sister Amy, who lived in Austin. To reach the family home place out in West Texas, it would take another 4 hours on the road. They knew their parents were eagerly awaiting for their arrival for Thanksgiving holidays, so there was never a doubt that they wouldn't make the day-long trip. Beautiful scenery exists along some routes in Texas. There are waterfalls, sparkly caves, sand dunes, and other hidden gems. In the springtime, people descend on the hill country to take pictures of their babies sitting in the beautiful bluebonnet fields. Unfortunately, parents may end up with pictures of crying babies that were stung by red ants in the grass. Sarah and Amy would miss seeing the bluebonnets. They would be traveling through the most barren part of the state to reach home. The girls had grown up in that barren section and had gladly left when they graduated from high school. They, however, did love their parents, who were expecting the girls to spend Thanksgiving with them. So Sarah stopped at a service station, filled the tank with gas, and they were on their way. It was not a pleasant trip for either of the sisters. Sarah complained about having to drive such a long way to pick up Amy, and Amy reminded Sarah that she hadn't asked to be picked up. When Sarah turned on the country western radio station, Hank Williams was whining his lovesick blues. Amy complained about honky-tonk music, so Sarah turned off the radio. They chatted about various family matters until Amy turned the radio back on. As they rolled up to their old home place, Amy assured Sarah that after the holidays, she would get back to Austin on her own. I don't want to ever put you out again, Amy told Sarah sarcastically. I did a little research and learned Amtrak has a train back to Austin. It's late at night, and that's perfect for me. I can sleep on the train and be ready for classes the next day. That way you can just head on back to Fort Worth when it's most convenient for you. Why, Amy, thank you, Sarah said. I really appreciate your research. I need to go over some matters with Dad, but I'll head back home just as soon as possible after lunch. I don't know if you realize it or not, but I'm the one who has to see to our parents since you're off in college, which, by the way, I didn't get to attend. Well, it's not my fault you didn't get a scholarship like I did. That's cruel, Sarah. I know, said Amy, and I'm sorry. You've proved that college education is not necessary to be a success. You have a well-paying job and you enjoy, and you have a nice boss who wants to marry you, so that seems like a success to me. The sisters fell silent for a while. Amy changed the station for the latest news. Sarah didn't complain. They rode with no conversation, listening to news, market reports, until Amy found the station playing popular music. Doris Day was singing That's Magic. It's costly running home to get Mom and Dad settled down after they've had one of their episodes, Sarah said. When Mom gets on her high horse and has had enough of Dad's crazy ideas, they don't call you, do they? They call me because I have a car. I'm the one expected to come running home and getting things straightened out for them. The sisters stopped squabbling when they finally reached the farm where they had grown up. While Amy helped her mother in the kitchen, Sarah saddled Beauty, that beautiful black horse that she had grown up with. There she goes, Amy says. It never occurs to her that she could help. When Sarah returned from her ride, lunch was ready to put on the table, but they had to wait for Sarah to freshen up. Sarah didn't seem to notice that her sister and mother were waiting for her with arms crossed and scowling faces. Surprisingly, the holiday was pleasant despite the sisters squabbling and despite the dark cloud hovering over the holiday due to Bubba's absence. The family missed Bubba. He was stationed over in Korea, and his letters were few and far between. Sarah made the mistake of saying she hoped the Army mess would provide a decent Thanksgiving meal for those soldiers over there in Korea. Their mother began crying and their father began cursing. Good Lord, Sarah, what made you say that? Look what you done. You got your mama all upset. John David joined up to serve our country over there in Korea. And you know what? I'm proud of my boy for joining up. Sarah sighed, and under her breath she said, he didn't join up. He was drafted and had to go. Amy grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her into the kitchen while her father was still cursing. He hollered after them. The papers came after John David already decided to join. Serving in the Army will make a man out of my boy. Yeah, I guess so, if it doesn't get him killed, Sarah said. Holy Mother of God, Sarah, her father shouted. Will you just shut up that big mouth of yours? And you go in there and apologize to your mama. She's bawling her eyes out. After that, they all steered conversations away from Bubba and whether he'd been drafted or joined up. The following evening, Amy hugged her parents and said goodbye. Sarah drove her to town to the train station and bought Amy a train ticket for a trip back to college. When the train pulled into the station, Sarah helped her aboard. Amy thanked Sarah, but Sarah ignored her. She was thinking of the long drive back to Fort Worth. On board the train, Amy wandered down the aisle to the first empty seat that she saw. It was dark, but several passengers had lights on. Amy opened an overhead storage bin to store her bag and pulled out a blanket, which she thought would come in handy for a nap she hoped to take. All at once, lights came on throughout the whole compartment, and Amy realized the train was packed with soldiers. The penny dropped. One of the largest military forts was in Texas. In fact, her college friends had been dating servicemen stationed out at Fort Hood. She even dated a few fellas herself. When she noticed a wedding ring on one soldier she dated, she decided she'd just stick with Ben, her old boyfriend she'd had for a long time. Amy asked the soldier seated in the window seat if it was okay if she'd take the aisle seat on that row. He mumbled and nodded affirmative. Thank you, Amy said, settling into the aisle seat. After a few minutes, the soldier said, I should be thanking you. Amy realized later that she should have turned off that overhead light at that moment, but she'd been thinking of Bubba. How lonely Bubba must be over there in Korea, and here she was sitting by a young man that reminded her of Bubba. Oh, where is your home? Amy asked the soldier. Oklahoma, he said. I got special leave to go there to see about my granny, who had a stroke and was in the hospital. Oh, I'm sorry, Amy said. She was wondering how to close down the conversation since she was hoping to take a nap or pull out that chemistry book to review for a test coming up. Yeah, the holidays were not good, the soldier said. I spent my leave with a cousin since Granny wasn't there. Oh, was your Granny visiting some other family members? No, he said, I just told you Granny was in the hospital. Oh, I'm sorry, Amy said, I guess I'm tired. I wasn't thinking clearly. The soldier was quiet, so Amy closed her eyes and thought the conversation was over. A few minutes later, he whispered, I'm being shipped out to Korea in a few weeks. Amy didn't respond, but she thought of Bubba over there in Korea and how he appreciated letters from home. I don't understand why we are in Korea, the soldier said. Amy didn't respond. She hoped the soldier would now consider the conversation over. South Korea and North Korea are fighting, the soldier said. The South wants a government like the States, and the North wants something like China has, I think. Some people say the Korean War is about democracy, that we ought to help the South Koreans. Well, Amy said, I guess so, but it doesn't seem right that our American boys are having to fight over in a foreign country. My brother's in Korea, and we want him to come back home safely. She closed her eyes and hoped the conversation was now over. She kept her eyes closed, hoping he would think she was sleeping. I sure could use a pen pal while I'm over there, the soldier whispered. Amy opened her eyes. The soldier was holding a pen and a scrap of paper. She hesitated, trying to figure out how she could turn him down politely. What was the harm in giving him her address? She wouldn't have to answer his letters. But that would be kind of mean, wouldn't it? It was all Bubba's fault. Later, she wasn't sure if she had given the soldier her address or not. Granny is a good person, the soldier was still talking about his grandmother. My parents split up and I don't know where they are now. Well, Amy said, that's too bad, hoping the conversation was over now. She closed her eyes and felt herself drifting off to sleep. I would probably be in prison if it wasn't for Granny, the soldier was saying. In high school, I got in trouble with a kid who was into drugs. We got caught. Granny paid my fines, paid the attorney. I will always be indebted to Granny. She kept me out of the pen, for sure. Amy thought the conversation was surely over by now. Anyway, the soldier continued, when I get out of the Army, I'm going back up there to Oklahoma and I'm going to help my Granny. She's too old to be doing that kind of work she's doing. But you know, Granny's tough. She makes those cowhands working for her earn their pay. Amy didn't respond, but the soldier kept talking. Granny's a good cook, too. Just looking at her, dressed like a man, you wouldn't think she could make pretty cakes. People say her cakes are works of art. Yeah, she makes pies, too. She made me an apple pie and a big old chocolate cake while I was home. She has recipe books stacked on the shelves in her kitchen. She even cuts out recipes out of magazines. The soldier listened, waited for a response. And when there was none, he just turned off the overhead light. When Amy awoke, she had no idea how long she'd been sleeping, but her hand was being held by the soldier, and the blanket covered them both. The soldier was sound asleep, breathing quietly. Oh, Lordy, Amy thought. What happened while she was sleeping? She'd done something she shouldn't have done. When she was a kid, she walked in her sleep, and she remembered waking up outdoors one time, not knowing she was outside. Amy tried to remember if anything had happened while she dozed. She slipped out from under the blanket, straightened her pullover sweater, closed her eyes, and fell asleep again. When she awoke, the soldier was still talking about his Granny. Amy had no idea how long she'd been sleeping. I don't know what I'm going to do with that big old house of Granny's, the soldier was saying. My cousin's living in the house now, and he's taking care of the cattle. When I get out of the Army, I'll head back up there and see what kind of rancher I can be. He laughed. If they get oil on the property, I'll have to see if oil and cattle can get along. Amy said, oh my, are they looking for oil at Granny's property? Yeah, the soldier said, if there's oil, Granny'll never have to worry about money again. I can't imagine Granny a big spender, though. She's not what you call fancy. Most of the time, she's just wearing overalls and an old leather coat. I think she has a dress she wears for church and funerals. Your Granny sounds interesting, Amy said. The soldier remained quiet, so Amy closed her eyes, hoping to nap again. As she drifted off to sleep, she realized the soldier was still talking about his grandmother. A noisy clamor of voices wakened Amy. It was morning. The train had stopped at her destination. The soldier was gone. She stood to retrieve her luggage as passengers filled the aisles. Amy pushed her way into the aisle to retrieve her luggage and slowly made her way off the train. Amy tried again and again to remember what happened that night on the train, but it was all a blur. She remembered chatting with a kind, good-looking soldier. She remembered dozing intermittently while he talked about his grandmother. She remembered that he had asked her for her address. She couldn't recall if she had given her address to him or not, but she hoped she had. Amy completed her clinical classes, forgot all about the young man on the train. Several months later, however, she received a letter from Private George Williams. It was a friendly letter from the young man from Oklahoma she met on the train. She remembered his holding her hand on the trip. She read the letter and learned that he was being shipped out to Korea and he wanted to stay in touch with her. At the time, Amy was studying for finals and forgot about the letter she received from the soldier she met on the train. When later she searched for the letter, she couldn't find it. She never received another one. She hoped the soldier had not lost his life in Korea. Amy never forgot the soldier she met on the train. She remembered him and smiled when she saw a soldier in uniform. She remembered him and smiled when it was Thanksgiving. She read about those oil wells in Oklahoma. Amy smiled, and she hoped the soldier was back home with his grandmother. Amy married Ben, the boyfriend she had when she was a student nurse. He still worked as an orderly at the hospital where they met. Ben had a gambling problem. Money was often short. There were times when Amy wondered how she would pay the rent. That's when she thought about those oil wells in Oklahoma and she cried herself to sleep.
Oh, you take us on such good trips.
That was fun. It actually kind of is personal. That kind of happened to me on a train trip. So.
Oh, I think I didn't take a breath the whole time.
Oh, well,
it was
I'm glad
wonderful.
you
Thank you so much.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay.
We're done.